My whole family dropped me and refused to talk to me when they thought I wasn't Dad's son. I grew up in a happy household. My parents loved each other deeply and loved my siblings and me even more. They were attentive and caring, always putting our needs before their own. My relationship with my parents was particularly good. My dad worked long hours to provide for us but always made time for us when he could. He would take us on fishing trips, teach us how to play sports, and tell us stories about his own childhood. My mom was the glue that held our family together, cooking us delicious meals, helping us with our homework, and making sure we were always clean and presentable. I loved my parents, and I knew they loved me too. But my world came crashing down when my parents started fighting. I had always thought of them as the perfect couple. They had been together for as long as I could remember and rarely argued, but one day things changed. It started with small disagreements, but soon the arguments became more frequent and intense. I tried to ignore them, but they were impossible to ignore. My mom and dad would shout at each other for hours, and I could hear every word from my room. One day, I heard my dad admit to having an affair years ago. My mom was livid and retaliated by admitting to having an affair of her own. The argument escalated until my dad questioned my paternity. I was stunned. I had never even considered the possibility that he might not be my biological father. My mom was speechless and didn't know what to say. She looked at me with tears in her eyes, but I could see the guilt and shame on her face. My dad stormed out of the house and my mom went after him. After that day, everything changed. My siblings took my dad's side and refused to talk to me. They were angry that my parents had cheated on each other, but even more so that my mom had cheated on him and that I might not be his biological son. They treated me with hostility and disdain, and I felt like an outsider in my own family. My siblings and I were caught in the middle of their argument, and it was like a bomb had exploded in our house. My mom and dad started to treat each other with hostility, and it wasn't long before their anger spilled over to us. My siblings, who had always been close to me, suddenly turned against me. They blamed me for the fact that our family was falling apart. They said that I was a reminder of my mom's affair and that I might not even be my dad's biological son. Their words hurt me deeply. I had always thought of us as a tight-knit family, but now it seemed like we were torn apart. My parents were distant and cold, and my siblings were mean and vindictive. I tried to talk to my parents, but they were always busy or distracted. They seemed to be consumed by their problems and didn't have time for me. It felt like nobody noticed me anymore. Even my brothers and sisters avoided me completely. They didn't invite me to hang out with them or even talk to me. It was like I didn't exist to them. Feeling rejected was really tough, and I didn't know how to handle it. I felt like I had lost everything, my family, my home, and even who I was. I felt lost and alone, not knowing if I could ever find my way back. At first, I tried reaching out to them. I called and texted my siblings, hoping to talk things out, but they never replied. I even tried calling my parents, but they were always busy or not home. I was desperate to talk to someone, anyone who could help me understand what was going on. So, I went to my mom's house, hoping to talk to her. But instead of listening, she told me to leave. Her words really hurt, and I couldn't believe my own mother would say that to me. After that, I fell into a deep sadness. I didn't know who I was anymore or where I belonged. I stopped going to work, seeing my friends, and doing things I enjoyed. I spent most of my days in bed, feeling lost and alone. I hardly ate and lost a lot of weight. Months passed, and I felt like I would never escape the darkness. But then, I realized my friends had been there for me all along. They called, checked up on me, and invited me to do things with them. At first, I didn't want to go, but eventually, I started joining them. They made me feel like I wasn't alone, and I'm grateful for that. I started focusing on myself, seeking therapy and support groups to help me deal with the pain of being rejected by my family. My friends were always there to listen and support me without judging. Talking to them about what happened helped me feel better and move forward. I also found comfort in activities that made me happy. I picked up my guitar again, something I had stopped doing when I felt depressed. Playing music helped soothe my soul and let out my emotions. As I started taking better care of myself, I noticed my mental health getting better. The sadness I felt before began to fade, and I started thinking about my future. My friends were always there for me, cheering me on and offering support when things got tough. They reminded me that I wasn't alone, even if my family wasn't there for me. Then, out of nowhere, my grandpa reached out to me. He was upset with how my family had treated me and wanted to make things right. He convinced me and my dad to take a paternity test. Despite my doubts, I agreed. When the results showed that I was indeed part of the family, my relatives were shocked. They realized their mistake and apologized for the pain they caused me. But even with their apologies, I struggled to forgive them. I had moved on and built a life without them, and I was afraid of being hurt again. Despite their persistent attempts to reconcile, I decided not to reconnect with them. I didn't want to reopen old wounds and risk getting hurt again. I had finally found peace and happiness with my new family, my friends, who had been there for me every step of the way.